It is now 10:46 a.m. This meeting is hereby in session, having established a quorum. And at this time, I would like to open up the floor for any public comments, if there are any. At this time, we can invite the witness and his counsel to come up to the chamber while we wait for people who wish to make public comments. I see that there are no interested individuals outside to make any public comments. Good morning, Commissioner Guerrero, and welcome back, Council Uggan. Before we proceed with today's meeting, I want to make some administrative order of business. I would like to ask everyone to please silence your cell phones, including the witness. Commissioner Guerrero, I need to ask you this on the record. Do you have any weapons or your sidearm with you today? Thank you. The commissioner has indicated he does not have his service weapon on him, as there are absolutely no weapons allowed of any kind in the chamber. And we will, for today's meeting, we have the vice chair to my left, Representative Bloss Jonathan Atto. We have Representative Ed Probst. We have Representative Christina Sablon. We have Representative Donald Minglonia, and to my right, I have Representative Vicente Camacho and Representative Richard Lizama. Commissioner, may I ask you to please raise your hand and our council will administer the oath to you?
Mr. Robert A. De Leon Guerrero, do you solemnly swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you shall give in the matter at hand shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to address the commissioner at this time. Commissioner Guerrero, you have been summoned before this committee because the committee has opened the investigation into the expenditure of public funds by Governor Ralph De Leon Guerrero Torres and Mrs. Diane Tadella Torres. You are here in relation to your duties as DPS Commissioner. And I want to emphasize to you that you are not the focus or the subject of this investigation. At this time, we will go right into it in the interest of time. And I will recognize Representative Bloss Jonathan Atto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner Guerrero. Good morning, Council Uggan. Welcome back. We start off, Commissioner, just for the record, some preliminary questions. Please state your name and current position for the record.
My name is Robert A. Guerrero, Commissioner of Public Safety.
Thank you, Commissioner. How long have you been the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety?
Over 6 years now.
Thank you again, Commissioner. Briefly describe your duties and responsibilities as the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety.
I'm the administrator for the entire department, and as well as overseeing the operations of the welfare and well-being of the officers and the needs of the department.
Thank you again, Commissioner. Have you completed any police academy?
No, I haven't.
Have you completed any law enforcement academy?
No, I haven't.
I know you answered that you haven't completed any police academy or law enforcement academy. How about during your military service? Did you receive any law enforcement training there?
In the military, you do some law enforcement training as well as terrorist training, a whole bunch of training during your career.
Thank you. Thank you again, Commissioner. So is it fair to say that prior to becoming the DPS Commissioner, you did not have any experience or training as any law enforcement other than your military, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. I yield for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving right along, I will now recognize Representative Edwin Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good morning. Council, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with asking some questions about a non-disclosure agreement that was circulated. Cam, can we pull up that exhibit just so, do we have a copy of the non-disclosure agreement? Commissioner, are you familiar with this non-disclosure agreement that was circulated at DPS? It's on the screen.
May we be provided a copy, please?
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Can we have a copy for the council and the commissioner, please? One moment. Sorry, while we're waiting for this non-disclosure agreement, just as a foundation, Commissioner, I do notice that you have several of your police officers here today. Are they here on their own volunteerism in accordance, or were they asked to appear here?
I didn't ask anybody to appear up here other than my family.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, moving on, if you see the copy of the non-disclosure agreement. Commissioner, have you signed any non-disclosure agreement with Governor Ralph Torres or the Office of the Governor prior to coming here today?
No, I've never signed any agreement.
Thank you, sir. Have you or anybody from the governor's office ever asked any employee of the Department of Public Safety to sign any non-disclosure agreement with DPS or the office of the governor?
Not to my knowledge.
Cam, can we pull out the exhibit for the letter from DPS Commissioner to the JGO Chair? Commissioner, would you like a copy of this as well for council? If it's difficult to see, we can provide you a copy.
It's also in the screens in front of you.
Yeah.
If it's easier for you.
Can we please get a copy?
Can-
It's just hard to see what
Certainly.
you're
certainly.
referring to.
Cam, I'm sorry, can you print a copy? Thank you. Okay, Commissioner, you have a copy of the letter, correct? Okay, thank you. Commissioner, here is a letter to the chair of the JGO Committee dated July 2nd, 2021, in response to a subpoena ducis tecum served upon you. This is your signature at the bottom of this letter, correct, Commissioner?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, so in this letter, you stated, among other things, that one, no such non-disclosure agreements have been executed and or exist by and or between the Department of Public Safety, DPS officers, and the Office of the Governor and or Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres. Two, there are no such communications regarding non-disclosure agreements by and or between the Department of Public Safety, DPS officers, and the Office of the Governor and or Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres. And three, to your knowledge, no DPS personnel have signed any such non-disclosure agreements by and or between the Department of Public Safety, DPS officers, and the Office of the Governor and or Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres. Commissioner Guerrero, are these statements from your letter still your testimony today regarding non-disclosure agreements by or between DPS and the Office of the Governor and or Mrs. Diane Torres?
To my knowledge, yes.
Thank you,
In-
Commissioner. Excuse me, Representative Probst.
Yes.
The letter from Commissioner Robert A. Guerrero that was just entered into evidence is hereby marked as Exhibit 109. You may proceed, Representative Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Guerrero, this committee has subpoenaed and received no less than 12 non-disclosure agreements with DPS and the Office of the Governor that have been signed by officers of your department. All of these were signed on or about June 22nd and 23rd of this year, when this committee's investigation of the governor's public expenditures was already underway. Commissioner, how do you explain these NDAs is if you said that no DPS personnel have signed any such NDA by and or between the Department of Public Safety, DPS officers, and the Office of the Governor and or Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres?
Objection, Chair. None of these NDAs are entered into evidence yet, and my client hasn't had a chance to review any of them. If you would provide my client a copy, perhaps he could answer a different question, but he already answered this question.
Short recess. This time we will suspend that question from Representative Probst. You may proceed, Representative Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner, at this time, for the time being, I'd like to withhold that question, and we will come back to it later in today's questioning. I have one more question. Commissioner, you have stated in your letter that you would provide an update to this committee on your internal investigation regarding this NDA distribution that's circulated throughout DPS. This committee, as of this time, has not received any updates. What steps did you take after your July 2nd letter to get to the bottom of whoever is impeding this investigation? Did you find out who was actually distributing this NDA?
Chairwoman, once again, this is sensitive information, and I ask that this line of questioning not be asked unless we go into some type of executive session.
His letter is public record, counsel, and he did say in his letter that he will provide this committee an update. And as of today's date, I still have not, or neither any of the members of this committee have ever received any updates from the commissioner. So we're just asking for an update, whether, he's seen the NDAs and all that.
I understand, but Congressman's question specifically asks about how he is going about the investigation. Perhaps I can discuss with my client and then provide you that update
Okay.
after the hearing.
Thank you, counsel. Yes, if you could, and this committee would like an update as to this NDA that had circulated, that was in fact impeding this investigation. So we, of course, do want to follow up on that. Madam Chair, I yield at this time. Commissioner, counsel, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. I would now like to recognize Representative Donald Minglonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner Guerrero and Council Ogan. The questions I have for you, Commissioner, are based on your role with the PSDs for the Governor and Mrs. Diane Torres. Commissioner, what is your role and how do you select and assign personal security details for the Governor?
Chairwoman, I apologize, but again, this is sensitive information for DPS, and I would request that we go into executive session. If
It's
we're
just
gonna ask
asking
any
what
of these
his
questions.
role is. It's a general question. We're not going to ask details about their training and et cetera.
So you're overruling my objection?
Yes,
Okay, thank
duly
you.
noted. You may proceed, Representative Minglonia.
Oh, I'm waiting for the Commissioner's response.
Madam Chair, do I need to answer his question?
Yes, you do. Please answer the question.
Well, can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
What is your role and how do you select and assign personal security details for the Governor?
in consultation with the Chief of Security, he actually screens, and then I have the final. I'm the one that finally assigns them to that role.
So during this process, does the Governor choose the officers assigned to his PSD?
Again, Chair, this is sensitive information that I'm not comfortable my client answering in an open forum. I ask that you move to executive session if you're going to ask this type of questions.
I don't see how the question is the governor involved in selecting or personally choosing a security detail. There are no training questions in there.
How the DPS selects its officers to do certain roles is sensitive information and should not be disclosed in public.
This is a question asking whether the governor selects. Duly noted, counsel. You may answer the question.
Not to my knowledge.
What about the First Lady? Is she involved in the selection of her PSDs?
Just noting my objection, same objection, Chair.
Duly noted, counsel. Witness, please answer the question.
PSDs for both government, to govern, for the governor itself, or first lady for the matter, is just one detail. Who they assign to the first lady, it's at the prerogative of the officer in charge or the chief of security.
Can you share what criteria you use for selecting these PSDs?
Chairwoman, I must object again and ask that if the committee wants to go down this line of questioning, that we don't do it in a public forum. This is sensitive information to DPS and the safety of our community.
Duly noted, counsel. How about this question? Does the years of experience of an officer matter when selecting a PSD for governor or the first lady?
That's the same issue of that question, Chair.
There are no security issues that I can see with that. It's a matter of tenure. That certainly isn't a criteria that could be used, that should be in an executive session.
I would argue that all the decision-making process behind choosing PSDs is a matter of sensitive information to DPS, and that my client can answer those questions, just not in a public forum. Alternatively, if you like, you can submit the questions and we can get them to you as long as they're confidential.
Privilege, Madam Chair.
Recognize Representative Tina Sablon.
I think it's important to just clarify what we're actually asking for here. We're not seeking any classified or top secret information. And in fact, I would see this line of questioning that Representative Donald Maglonia is trying to ask as the equivalent of asking what is the job description of a PSD, which should be public record. If somebody wanted to apply for this job, what are the basic qualifications? That is not a secret. You can look up selective service, secret service qualifications online right now. These are not secrets. And I think that the witness should be directed to go ahead and answer the question, and we need to proceed. Thank you.
Your objection is overruled. May the witness please answer the question.
Repeat your question again.
Do you have any criteria in terms of how you select these PSDs?
Yes, there is.
Can you please share what those criteria entail?
I don't have every detail of that with me. Of course, you have to be been a police officer. Normally, you would have to be a police officer within the department. We've had instances where PSDs were assigned that were from outside the department and end up being deputized. But no tenures. I mean, you mentioned something about tenure earlier.
The chair did.
Yeah, the tenure in the department is not really a criteria. It's basically based on if you're a sworn officer and also the training that you may have based on the selection by the chief of security.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. All DPS personnel that have come before this committee, Officer Jomalyn Galasio, Sergeant Flora Ogden, Officer Adrian Mendiola, Lieutenant Emery Kaipet, Assistant Chief Kevin Adan, Sergeant Joey Cruz, they have never mentioned, and in fact, they have testified that they have never received any alert of any imminent danger to the governor or Mrs. Diane Torres. So, can you please justify what the reason was behind providing security details for off-island travels to Governor or Mrs. Diane Torres in as many as 4 PSDs for these trips?
Your question was who requests for PSD off island?
Now, how do you justify if all these PSCs that came before the committee have testified that the governor nor Mrs. Diane Torres were in any imminent danger, can you justify sending 4 PSDs on the these off-island trips?
Um, The request sent off-island PSDs is based on the request of the security chief, who comes to me and tells me the governor's going to this place and we'll need this many people that's going to be.
I'm sorry,
passing by.
Commissioner, may I ask you to please either take off the mask so we can hear you clearly? I can barely
Can you hear me?
hear you. Thank you.
Or if you can pull the mic a little closer.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. So the request for off-island travel, if the governor's going off-island for PSDs, is a request coming from the chief of security. He is actually the one that requests through me how many, that he needs to send so many details with the governor. Or for dignitaries in general, not just, we've had that instance with Lieutenant Governor as well.
And more than half of these PSDs have come before this committee, and they've testified that they have not received specialized training or continuous trainings as PSDs. This is critical to their assignments in protecting their principles. And so, is it because DPS doesn't have enough in their annual budget to provide continuous training to maintain their skills as PSD?
Yes, yes, it's a matter of funding issue.
So, these officers have used words like shadowing and eyeballing. Would it be fair to say that if there was less of those, that maybe DPS would have enough money to train personnel?
Objection, Chairwoman. That's an argumentative question.
Duly noted. I'm interested in hearing, this is a body, this is the House of Representatives. We are charged with appropriating funds, and so this relates to appropriation issues for the department. We are trying to help the department and see what their needs are with this question as well. So your objection is noted, Counsel, and I would like the witness to please answer the question.
Your question is the word shadow and eyeballing?
They've come to use terms such as shadowing and eyeballing. So would you say that it's fair that maybe in order to get less of those responses, that DPS would have enough money to train personnel?
I believe it's safe to say, Congressman, that eyeballing and shadowing is a SOP within that section. And there's other code words that are used. So if information gets in the wrong hands, only the PSD would know.
Fair enough. Thank you. Commissioner, when we interviewed PSD Joey Cruz, that he mentioned that for nearly 6 years he has served as PSD for the governor. There has never been a threat made to the governor that he has ever known of. If there were a threat, he would certainly be made aware of it as the governor's chief of security. Commissioner, has the Marianas Regional Fusion Center located in Hagåtña, Guam, ever, to your knowledge, ever issued any threat alert against Governor Torres or Mrs. Diane Torres?
Not to my knowledge.
So what was the justification for providing PSD to Mrs. Diane Torres?
The question was what is the justification to provide security for Ms. Torres?
Yes.
It's based on the statute that allows the DPS to provide safety to public officials, and based on the AG's opinion, that even family members are entitled to that.
Do you have that AG's opinion?
I do, Madam Chair, but I'd be more comfortable if you retract that information from the AG himself.
Okay. And what statute are you referring to that says DPS is required to provide security and safety for public officials, aside from dignitaries, visitors.
I could get that to you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, counsel. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Guerrero, we know for a fact that DPS provides PSD for Mrs. Diane Torres because Officer Jomalin Galacio and Sergeant Flora Ogden testified that they are the PSDs for Mrs. Diane Torres. Does the governor go directly to you to coordinate PSDs for his spouse?
No, again, any request for protective service for the governor comes from the security chief himself.
So all requests made for PSDs come through Sergeant Joey Cruz.
Yes, anything dealing with PSD, yes.
For the first time in Commonwealth history, full-time PSDs are assigned to the First Lady. PSDs have also been used to take the children of the governor and the First Lady to appointments like the dentist and to transport them to and from school and to other activities such as bringing Mrs. Torres to wedding invitations. Commissioner, did Governor Torres ask you to assign PSDs for his spouse for the First Lady?
Congressman, that question has already been asked and answered by my client. I refer to his previous answer.
So does the commissioner direct PSDs to provide these extended services?
Can you just clarify your question, Congressman?
Does the commissioner authorize PSDs to do these other activities in regards to transporting and picking up and bringing Mrs. Torres to these events?
Again, Congressman, the operations of the PSD is under the command of the security chief.
Thank you. Now, earlier you mentioned that according to the AG's opinion, the PSDs is extended to family members. Meanwhile, the wife of the lieutenant governor isn't provided a PSD?
I believe that she doesn't have any, but again, his security detail has never requested for additional people.
Sorry, can you just repeat that last part?
Okay, I don't believe he does, but his security person hasn't requested additional personnel.
Now, when it comes to off-island travel and bringing along the PSDs, does the governor go to you to request for PSDs?
He answered that question already, Congressman. I refer to the.
All right,
his
what if
answer.
it's, okay, so let me extend that question. What if it's non-personal or non-governmental business? Does the governor go to you to get PSDs for personal trips?
When providing PSD, Congressman, I don't know if it's a personal trip or official trip. The governor's the governor, 24 hours a day, asks officers are officers 24 hours a day. So when he comes and asks, or the security chief comes and asks me that they're going to go off island for PSD, I don't ask this a personal trip or a government trip.
All right, thank you. Just a few more. Cam, can we get up Exhibit 2?
While we're waiting for that, I have a few clarifying questions of the witness. You mentioned the head of security, the title head of security. Who do you know that to be?
That's Sergeant Joey Cruz.
Okay, thank you. In Sergeant Joey Cruz's testimony here a couple weeks ago, he said he receives orders from you as to traveling issues for the PSDs. So can you clarify that? That is his testimony here in the chamber. And now you're telling us that it's up to him, but he's saying he gets orders from you as well. Can you clarify that, please?
This Congresswoman, I believe, or Chairwoman, I'm sorry. Um, I wouldn't know where the governor's going. He's the one that stays with the governor basically all day. So he's the one that knows the governor's schedule. I don't know the governor's schedule on a daily basis. So if he comes to me, maybe what he meant was that I approve it if he requests it.
Fair enough.
That's as far as I can say with that question, Madam Chair.
Fair enough. So you depend on Sergeant Joey Cruz being the head of security of the governor, and does that include the First Lady's PSDs then?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And you have said that all PSDs are under the command of Sergeant Joey Cruz. Is that correct?
Yes, for the governor.
For the governor, yes. So whose command is Sergeant Joey Cruz under? Who
Under
does
my-
he report to?
Under my command.
Under your command. Okay, thank you. And you have mentioned that when PSDs travels, you don't know if it is for personal trip or business trip. Is that correct?
I meant the governor, Madam Chair. I don't know if the governor's trip is personal or not because I don't see his TAs or who pays for his fare. The reason I know that the PSDs are traveling because I need a copy of their TA. Majority of their TA, if not all of them, it's not funded under my office. So that's needed for for payroll purposes.
Okay, I got it.
Chair, if I may, I found the section. It's section 1 CMC 2504, and the message from Attorney General is that that statute is written broadly to cover family members of the governor because of the rest. Sorry, it's hard to read. Because of that, include but not limited to the following language. And so the section that he's referring to is 1 CMC 2504. And that is the government purpose that he's talking about.
Thank you. We will take a look at the statute.
Thank you, Chairman.
And back to the witness, Commissioner, you have mentioned that you don't know if when the governor travels, it's for personal or business or anything like that. Does that apply to the First Lady's travels as well? Because certainly she has traveled with personal security details as well. The security details have testified before this committee that they are the PSDs for First Lady Diane, and they do travel with her. So is it also your testimony that you don't know whether First Lady Diane's travels are personal or business?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You may proceed, Representative Donald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, on the screen in front of you, you have a copy of Ms. Jomelin or Officer Jomelin Galacio's TA to the Philippines. This is a TA requesting and requested and approved by the governor for Officer Jomelin Galacio to accompany First Lady Diane to the Philippines. Can you explain why the First Lady was provided a PSD to go on a personal trip to the Philippines?
Chair, may we get a full copy? It's hard to see this with
Certainly,
just a
Council.
section of the papers.
While we're waiting for that, I have a couple more questions. You said you don't ask whether a trip is personal or not. Have you ever asked the Chief of Security, Sergeant Joey Cruz, if this trip is personal or business? Or do you just allow him to dictate?
I don't, not to my recollection that I've ever asked, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever denied any request of Joey Cruz when he asked for additional personnel or PSDs or to go on traveling or fishing or whatever? Have you ever denied any request from the Chief of Security?
Not to my recollection, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Let me ask that again, Commissioner. Can you explain why Mrs. Dan Torres was provided a PSD on a personal trip to the Philippines?
Again, Congressman, the Chief of Security would come up to me and say, Governor's going off island, the First Lady would, you need PSD.
Were you aware that she was going to Philippines?
This TA is under the Governor's office, not under my account at DPS. So um, um, I don't recall when my answer was, or if I said anything when he did that, or when he came and told me that.
Do you think this is acceptable, though?
Uh, Only speaking, Congressman, it's not my job to actually question if it's an official function for her to go or not. As long she's under travel order, so I'm assuming that's an official function that the PSD flying out to. When you're asking if the First Lady's trip is, I cannot answer that question.
So, if you were the approving officer for this trip, would you have approved this trip if you had known it was for personal?
Again, I don't question if a trip is official or not. So again, I wouldn't know what.
All right. Thank you for that. Commissioner, PSCs have testified that they have at times traveled separately from the governor or the first lady, taking boats or different flights from their principals. There have been occasions when officers assigned as PSDs to travel with the governor or first lady and returned home without them. There have been occasions when PSDs completed government travel without having actually seen either the governor nor the first lady. How can you explain this?
I don't have no knowledge of incident like that unless you have documentation that can. I don't recall of any incident like that happening unless you have documents that show that that did occur.
Well, we do, but I'm saying, what? How can you justify a situation where PSDs return without the governor or the first lady?
So when they leave out, for example, on the boat, The governor decides to stay on Tinian and say, "Oh no, spend the night." The boat comes back. I asked what happened to the governor. As a boat crew, sometimes what happened to the governor, or they'll go back. They're going to say 201 is laying over in Tinian. We're going to head back. So, I mean, that's the best I can.
So they don't get approval from you if they were to leave their principal behind?
They'll advise me that, or the security chief will advise me, or sometimes the boat crew advise me that the governor said, "Go ahead and head back. I'm going to stay here for the night." But I don't recall. I'm just using this as an instance. I can hardly recall anything like that happening.
If you believe threats may exist to justify the assignment of PSDs to the governor and first lady, then why have you not ensured that all PSDs are properly trained and equipped to do so?
Well, uh, one is the statute mandates that, and we do our best in trying to comply with the statute. The initial PSD actually were trained 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't recall the exact date because of funding issue and scheduling issue with the actual training that did the previous PSD training. That hasn't occurred, and especially now with the COVID issue.
Because has never really been any actual threat. Do you feel that on certain occasions during the governor's or the first lady's travel that there wasn't a need for PSDs to accompany them?
Again, Congressman, that's actually not. I'm not positioned to decide whether he needs one or not when he travels. It's a security chief that actually sees what he goes through when he does travel. So if he comes to us and says he needs PSD to escort the governor to this place, travel, then I don't want to wait until something happens to actually assign people.
Thank you. Earlier when we had our hearing with the lieutenant governor, he testified that he does not encourage or he does not get an entourage of PSDs anywhere, and described that the governor's use of multiple officers at a time, sometimes 4 or 5, he described that as overkill. How would you respond to that, Commissioner?
Congressman, I'm not in a position to give an answer to that question. That the lieutenant governor is entitled to his opinion. I know the governor's been threatened, if I'm not mistaken, 2 separate occasions over the governor's office, where rocks thrown to the window. So again, I don't know why the ALT will say that to the committee.
So, if that's the case, why doesn't the lieutenant governor get the same treatment?
He's never requested, for one, but if his security person has indicated one time or another that it's enough with him to handle the PSD for him.
But so the lieutenant governor doesn't ask for, or he doesn't need the additional PSDs, and he's never asked for it.
Objection, Chairwoman. That's misstating my client's testimony.
Can the witness, duly noted, counsel, can the witness restate your answer, please?
I'm not, I believe he's never, it's not that he doesn't need it, but he's never actually requested no additional PSDs through his security person.
But you stated the governor had 2 threats. So wouldn't you provide the same service to the lieutenant governor?
It's basically if he requests, because with the security chief will actually what dictates who get or how many, what the needs are. I'm sorry. And there are times where the lieutenant governor doesn't want to be driven around. So as the governor, sometimes he tells PSDs to that he doesn't want to be driven. And of course, I'll get on the PSDs that he needs to, or get on him telling that he needs to be shadowed at a minimum.
Does the governor make his request in terms of how many PSDs he would need?
It's if whatever additional he needs, it actually goes to security chief. I have no knowledge if the governor has ever requested additional or less.
Thank you for your time, Commissioner. Madam Chair, are you?
Thank you, Representative Magonia. So, Commissioner, would it be fair to say that all these PSDs are left up to one person, Police Sergeant Joey Cruz, to determine the need, to determine whether they need to travel with their principals? Is that what your testimony is today?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So going back to this TA, you said you don't know whether the principals are traveling on business or personal. You said this is not coming out of DPS account, but their salary is that correct?
Yes, they do.
Including all overtime.
Yes, they do.
So when the PSDs travel with their principals, they incur overtime, is that correct?
Not if if I'm not correct, Madam Chair, and I need to get back with you on this, because if they're under TA, I don't believe they're entitled to overtime while under travel
Okay.
authorization.
Okay.
But I need to get clarification on that.
Sure.
If that's the case. I know if it's stipend, they do, but again, let me get clarification on that if I may.
Thank you, and we would appreciate that. I'm very interested in that information because one of the PSDs has testified that they do incur 24-hour. They're on a 24-hour shift when they travel, so they do incur overtime, in my opinion, or as the records would reflect. So I'm very interested in getting that information.
Yes, ma'am.
That
Chair,
is
if I
all.
may, that mischaracterizes the testimony a little as well. She said that she's on a 24-hour shift, doesn't mean that she's getting paid overtime for it. And also, just to be clear, you wanted that information for this trip, the Philippines trip?
For any PSDs, I'm sorry,
So
I'll
for
clarify that. So for
all the
all the
trips?
PSDs that have been assigned to Mrs. Diane Torres and Governor Torres, their overtime records when they travel. And as to the mischaracterization of the testimony, it was a PSD who did testify that they are on 24-hour shifts and they do incur overtime. I would like to clarify that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council. Moving right along, I will now recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Oh, yeah, good morning, Commissioner Guerrero and Mr. Or Council, Mr. Ogden. This my question would be related to governor's campaign rallies, travels. Has the governor ever advised you of his plan to attend campaign rallies or other political events while traveling on the government expense or dimes?
Can you clarify that question, Congressman? Yeah, can you clarify?
I will repeat. Has the governor ever advised you of his plans to travel or to attend campaign rallies or other political events while traveling under the government expense?
No, not to my recollection. We've never had a discussion such as that.
Good enough. Let's put up the exhibit for these campaign rallies in Oregon. If you look up the exhibit, Commissioner Guerrero, which you have in front of you, Commissioner, in April of 2018, the governor made a campaign stop in Oregon while on government travel, accompanied by his PSD. Were you aware of his plans to attend this political rally while he was on government-funded travel and receiving per diem or stipend, lodging, and through his PSD car rental and fuel? Were you aware?
Not, I don't recall such activity, Congressman.
Good enough. Let's go up to exhibit the next one, a rally in Guam. What you look at, you have that in front of you. Commissioner, Governor Torres also made a campaign stop in Guam in June 2018 while on government travel. Were you aware of his plans to attend political rally in Guam in June 2018 with his PSD?
I don't recollect, again, discussing that. My role again is if the chief PSD says that he needs to travel that the governor needs to travel there and he needs to accompany him, that's all the information that I get from him. I don't know if the governor is making a side trip or that's the whole intent of the trip. I don't know. I don't have no knowledge of that.
Have you ever seen these pictures?
Once
before
again,
today?
Commissioner, excuse me, may I ask you to please speak louder? I can barely hear you. Sorry.
My apologies. So again, Congressman,
Commissioner, have you ever seen these pictures before today?
I don't recall ever seeing this, Congressman.
Never seen it. Not even on
I don't
Facebook.
recall ever seeing it.
Okay, thank you. You're back.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have one question. Were you present at this political rally?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can you repeat,
This
please?
is between June 23rd, this is on June 23rd, actually, 2018. We have records of Jomelin Galasio, Lieutenant Emery Kaipat, um, Police Officer Adrian Mendiola taking a boat trip supposedly as to the purpose of their TA was to meet up with the governor and the first lady in Guam. Actually, on their TA is to escort, but they were not escorting because the governor, we have documents that prove that Governor Torres had a TA that he was actually in the United States when the boat left Saipan. And they were supposed to meet up in Guam on June 23rd, 2018 for this political rally in 2018. My question to you is, were you present in Guam on June 23rd, 2018 for this political rally?
Just to clarify, ask me if I was present at the rally, Madam Chair.
Yes, yes.
No, I wasn't. May I clarify that anytime the boat goes to Guam, in this particular, the impact, at the time, it was still under warranty because we just got the boat. It was undergoing maintenance. But to my knowledge, I don't believe any of those officers have ever attended any of the rallies. Not going down there by boat. Not to, again, to my knowledge, I have no knowledge of that happening. But no, I wasn't in attendance at this rally.
Okay, thank you. We have records that you signed off on their trip report, that they went down to Guam by boat to escort Governor Torres and First Lady Diane, but that was not the case. They were not escorting because Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres were not even on the boat. They were in the United States flying over to Guam. And that is what the TA states for Ms. Jomelin. And we can pull out that TA. We have it here, just to let you know. So it is your testimony that you were not present at this political rally. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We will proceed. I now recognize Representative Tina Sablon.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Commissioner Guerrero, and welcome, Council Ogun. I just wanted to first clarify before I move into my line of questioning the issue of PSDs and who gives the orders, so that we understand clearly how these decisions are made. So, Commissioner, you testified that it is up to the Chief of Security to determine the need for PSDs and the number of PSDs to assign and to request through you for his principals, correct? The governor or the first lady, right? And then you also stated that the governor or the lieutenant governor may at times request themselves if PSDs should be assigned to them or not, correct? Okay. And we have in previous hearings submitted exhibits for the record that show these very specific instances where PSDs did travel with the governor and or the first lady, and then either left on a separate flight earlier or later, or went on a boat while the governor and the first lady flew in somewhere, and it, according to the security chief, it is the governor who decides whether a PSD should fly or take a boat, for that matter. Is that your understanding of how the decisions are made? Ultimately, it's not just up to the security chief, it's also up to the governor.
I'm not aware if in this, if the governor discussed it with the security chief, whether he stays or not, or whether PSD is there. But again, when he comes to me, the concern here is the safety of the principals. Whether it's discussed with, whether they discuss with the governor saying, you guys go ahead and go back and I'll fly later. What, I have no knowledge with that. I wasn't on any of the trip with them.
Understood, but you said that there are times that you are aware of where the governor says, or the lieutenant governor for that matter, says, I want to drive myself, or I can relieve you for the day, or whatever.
Through the security personnel.
Right. So
Yes.
so the governor and the lieutenant governor may make these requests themselves. It's not just the chief that decides.
I assume that's the case. Again, I wasn't there if he tells them or what.
Okay, thank you. But you're aware that this has happened where the governor would say, I want to drive by myself, or I don't need this many PSDs. That's my understanding of what you said just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Thank you. So my next set of questions, Commissioner, have to do with the use of boating safety resources. And I guess the first question would be, when DPS boats are assigned to accompany the governor on any boating trip, whether it's for fishing or recreation or transportation to one of the other islands, how do you, as the head of this department, budget for these trips?
Your question, because of with all this activities, how do I fund, or how do I have no budget for it?
Yeah, how do you budget
well,
for
it
the
comes out of-
fuel, the salary, the overtime?
Yeah, all the salaries and fuel for the boats in this particular case comes out of the department's budget. If I encounter a shortfall in any of the funding in those areas, I actually consult the Secretary of Finance, OMB, for assistance if they can assist us in identifying funds for that particular for fuel in this case.
Sure. Have you at times had to ask the Secretary of Finance for assistance because there have been shortfalls?
I have, but it's not particularly because when we fuel, in this case, you asked about the boats. When the boats are filled, I'm not present when the boats are being filled. I don't even see the receipts of these boats until they're compiled at the end of the month with all the vehicles, the motorcycles, jet skis, generators, compiled into one, and that's when I sign off on the payment for that for that fuel. And if there's a shortfall, I ask Asset Finance to assist us. I'm having shortfall with vehicles getting fueled or our accounts being shut down. And that's when he assists us. And there are times when I've asked him for assistance. Yes.
Okay. And I guess what we're trying to understand here, because you have mentioned budget shortfalls a number of times already, just in the last couple of hours that you've sat with us today, and what we're trying to understand, because there are many trips using DPS boats that have gone out to accompany the governor and or his family over the last few years, and you mentioned you don't ever know whether a trip is personal or official. And how could you know from at the beginning of a fiscal year how many trips the governor plans to take using DPS boats? How can you budget for it?
I don't. Well, I don't know how many trips we'll take. That's what I meant when I said I don't. What it is we base ourselves on previous year's funding and why we accumulate that much fuel. In this particular case, we added additional fuel. We added additional fleet of our vehicles into the patrol section. Obviously, the fuel will go up, and that's where we anticipate where the costs are, and that's where we build our budget.
Okay,
Base
and
as far
same
as
with the
fuel.
other expenses like
Yes.
personnel and overtime. Okay.
Yes.
Does any portion of the resources that you allocate for these boating trips with the governor, any portion of that come from your federal funds?
Not for you talk about fuel and personnel, particularly and overtime for this matter. No.
Okay. Are federal funds used for any part of these trips?
The only thing that the Fed, in this case, the Coast Guard funds is for the maintenance of the program itself, i.e., services for not particularly the governor's trips, but in general, where the maintenance is due for a particular boat or particular vehicle.
Okay, so maintenance and repairs of the boats.
Yes.
And these are the boats that are used for all of your activities, but including the governor's trips.
Yes.
Thank you. And specifically, what funding sources do you use? You mentioned the Coast Guard funding.
It's the boating safety funds.
The boating safety grant.
Yes.
Are there other federal funds that are tapped for this?
For the governor's trips, you mean?
For the use of boating safety
Oh, no.
resources. Okay. And what about other agencies? Are other agencies the funds for other agencies used for these boating trips?
I have no knowledge with that.
Okay. In earlier testimony and in the records that we've obtained from your department, Mr. Commissioner, it has been disclosed to this committee that your officers have shadowed a 17-foot boat. Do you have any knowledge of who owns a 17-foot boat?
Congressman, can you please be more specific? That was a very vague and open question. Perhaps dates, times.
Okay.
We will take a short recess and pull that out from the voting records. announce that we will go into a lunch break while we look for the exhibits that we are asking questions for. And at this time, Representative Tina Sablan had the floor, and when we come back from recess, she will continue with her line of questioning. We will come back at about 2 p.m. today. Yes, thank you. Recess 12:06 p.m.